Tonight's guest is a four-time Bram Stoker Award-nominated author of over 50-plus books, including Blister, A Bad Day for Voodoo, and Wolf Hunt. Cemetery Dance Magazine said no author working today has come close to our guest's perfect mixture of comedy and terror, and he currently lives in the World Series Championship Braves, Atlanta, Georgia. So please welcome our friend, Mr. Jeff Strand.
Hola.
Good evening. Welcome. Hi, guys.
How's it going?
Hey, how you doing, people?
Good. Welcome, Jeff. Yeah. Well, thanks for doing this tonight. Appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here.
Very welcome.
Yeah,
congratulations, like 30. I said, on your 30 shows coming up. Your Atlanta Braves World Series champions. I don't know if you follow baseball, but Jeff, John, and I are
vaguely aware of that. I was actually out of town all weekend, so I missed all the excitement. But I'm at a high level aware of that there was some sort of baseball game that we won. So.
I don't even know how's the parade going in Atlanta. That must be a nightmare. I wonder what the route is that they go there. Boston's easy where we are, but traffic sucks no matter what in Boston. So someone waited for the parade.
In Atlanta too.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. Great. Yeah, we appreciate you coming on. Like Joel said, we're pushing show number 30 here. We just started a couple months ago, and we've been very lucky to have a lot of horror authors on. I book a lot of the shows, and I'm a horror junkie. So any chance I get to bring a horror author on that I've read and enjoyed, I definitely try to take advantage of that. So pretty excited to have you on.
Appreciate that.
Absolutely, yeah. I was telling Joel before we came on here that you have such a large body of work that it's hard. I discovered you a few years back, so I've only gotten a chance to read 3 or 4 of your books, and you have over 50 books published at this point, correct?
And we're going to go through each of them one by one.
Yeah.
In great detail.
Let's do it.
That's the goal. We absolutely
marathon.
We'll start at book 1. We'll work our way up to the newest stuff and just go through a description. But I was mentioning to you offline before we came on that I had just finished doing the audio book for the Haunted Forest tour. I was trying to find something that was, somewhat tied into like a Halloween type theme, and I was not disappointed. That was a wild ride for sure. So
yeah, I co-wrote that with Jim Moore, and that was just like, how much monster action can we pack into 80,000 words?
That's and it was jam packed from pretty much from page 1, minute 1. I did the audio, but how does that approach change when you're co-writing something with somebody versus doing it solo? What is that?
It was a lot different because I'm a kind of a slow, methodical writer, and I rewrite as I go. So I start each day rewriting what I wrote the day before, and I'm constantly circling back and editing. So kind of by the time I type the end, that is pretty much the book. There's still, another small revision, some polishing, but I rewrite so much as I go that it, by the time I'm done. Jim is a get the first draft out, worry about fixing it later. So when you have those two very different processes, it was a kind of a weird, challenging, turned out great. We're both very proud of the book, but it was the slow guy and the fast guy and the rewriter and to worry about the rewrites later. So it was crazy.
Yeah. I always wonder when you're co-writing with someone, how, if you'll be able to notice, where one of the writers did something versus another, but there was a very smooth, story as far as it felt like one whole story together. So,
well, it wasn't I wrote a chapter, he wrote a chapter, I wrote a chapter, he wrote a chapter. There are bits that were 3 chapters in a row that I wrote, and then there'll be a section where we were trading off paragraph by paragraph. It really, it's very, very difficult to figure out who wrote what, because Jim probably did 60% of the first draft, and then I did most of the rewriting. So it's, even I will go through and say, I don't remember who wrote that.
that's perfect, right?
Collaboration. It is.
Yeah.
Both of our hands are all over the final book.
That's great. Do you, in your nonfiction book on writing there, do you talk about that style you just mentioned, how you edit as you go, and what works for you?
Yeah, that's pretty much my full process, is always to just, because I'm a prolific writer, but I'm not that fast of a writer. It's just long hours. And yeah, I can't really, if I have a separate document where if there's something I really don't feel like addressing at the time, I'll just take a note and then, oh, how did he get a gun? Worry about that part later. But for the most part, I don't like to move on until I'm happy with what I've written. So there's a lot of circling back.
Great. I'll let one of these guys jump in, because I could talk to you solo all night, and I don't want it to be a one-on-one here. So,
yeah, I got a question about your earlier days when you wanted to be a comic strip artist, and I think that's very challenging, because you have to convey the whole idea in just a few instances, so you don't have a lot of space to do that. And what made you just give up that idea? Like, don't come with that story, because you said you couldn't draw, because you don't have to be a great artist to just do a nice comic strip. What was the real reason behind it?
That was really it. The drawing just stopped being fun. I realized I was enjoying the writing part and not the drawing part. And so, like, I had created a single panel comic strip that I was going to do. And I was having a lot of fun just coming up with individual gags. And I had a whole notebook just filled with the gags. But the actual drawing part, I realized I wasn't enjoying. And when I wasn't worrying about the quality, it was fun. I would just scribble on, if I was turning in a paper, I would scribble all over. I would do it for my own fun. When I was trying to do it at a professional level, it just it was not enjoyable for me. And at some point I said, you know what, I think I'm a writer and not an artist. And so I focused entirely on the writing portion. But, there is still a part of me that says, oh, I could be a newspaper comic artist now. And then I would be whining, newspapers are dead. My whole livelihood has crashed and burned all around me. But that was for, growing up. My goal was to have a comic strip in the newspapers. And then eventually around high school, I was like, no, I think I'm just going to write and not draw.
Got it.
And there's no newspapers anymore, so it's very, very hard.
Hey, we still have our local paper. It still comes up here in New Hampshire. It's rare, right? I think a lot of people get laid off now, but it's mostly digital stuff. But
I almost sort of revisited that dream, because a guy who really liked my books, who had his own comic strip, wanted to work together. And I said, well, what if we did an adaptation of my book, Fangboy, sort of a serialized 3 or 4 panel comic strip, and we decided we were going to do a backlog in case something happened. So we didn't want to just announce it and then have an issue. We wanted to build up about 3 months worth of strips, and then we would announce it. And we got 6 of them done, and then he had major personal issues and had to drop the project. So we have 6 very good Fangboy comic strips, and then it never went further than that. So,
oh man. Have you ever, the stories that I've read of yours would work really well as comic book series too, or like a graphic novel. Have you ever thought of dabbling in that, having any of your stuff converted into like a graphic novel? Because a lot of that horror, that, the creature feature type stuff, or even some of the comedy that you sprinkle in there, a lot of that would really tie well into like a comic book series. So
yeah, it's basically, if someone approached me to do it, I would be all over it, but I don't have like a lot of comic connections.
Gotcha.
So I wrote one just for fun. I wrote once I finished my day's novel writing, I did a comic book script just no plans for what to do with it when it was done, just for fun. And I wrote it, and I was at a convention. Jonathan Mayberry was like, "Hey, have you ever thought about doing a comic book script?" Like, yes, I actually have one complete. All right, you're going to send an email to my editor at Dark Horse. Subject one, Jonathan Mayberry sent me, and we'll see what happens. So Jonathan Mayberry sent the comic strip. About 45 minutes later, rejected.
Oh, jeez.
Never did anything else.
At least
with
it didn't
it.
leave you waiting, right? At least there's no suspense there, right?
Yeah, it wasn't like 3 weeks. Oh, this could be it. This could be it. It was like gone. So
Going to the mailbox, like, is this the letter? Right?
Well, Mayberry's probably like, hey, look out for this, right? So they got it right away, right? But yeah, man, I love Mayberry, by the way. Ghost Road Blues, did I say that right in the right order? That trilogy is one of my favorite trilogies of all time, and I would recommend that to anybody that's into horror. So just a side note, you mentioned his name and that popped in my head. So now you have a comic book connection. We're a fairly new company, but hey, maybe down the line. Yeah.
This is an oral agreement now. So
there you go.
Send us our scripts. We'll be really. We're not going to be resentful as those if you're good.
I mean, Jeff has a book called right. Yeah, exactly. It's recorded. It's across all platforms, so everyone sees it. So, but no, Jeff has a book called Clowns versus Spiders. So, I mean, think about that as a comic series. That sounds amazing, right? Just the thought of that comic book series sounds incredible. But yeah. So
I was just watching a show. There were two writers, and you were one of them. And I'm still watching it like I thought it was really insightful to do that. And it's like you are interacting with people who are there watching you live, but it doesn't seem like it. It seems like it's all written beforehand, because it's really natural. And it's like the old times when I was a kid, and my parents, they would be beside my bed, reading a book for me. That's something that I have never seen on YouTube. And like, are you planning on going on with that? Or I'm really late. Like, I just discovered you like this morning, and I thought that was really a great idea. Are you planning on going on?
I think the one you're talking about, I was on the show. I wasn't the one who set up the show. I was just a guest. I think that was probably the one with Alice Henderson, if the way you're describing it sounds familiar. And so that was just me being invited on. I haven't done a whole lot of YouTube stuff. I did long ago. I did my own podcast, and I was a big fan of the Dread Media podcast. And he said, if you wanted to do a podcast, I'll do all the editing and everything for you. All you have to do is record it and send it over. And I actually write about this experience in my book, The Writing Life. I did 6 episodes. I was like, it's good. It is perfectly good. It's entertaining. It's kind of funny, but it's not at the level of really great podcasts. It wasn't at the level of the ones that I devote my time to. And I just hit a point where I said, if I'm not doing something that's really, really great, I should focus on the books instead. Yeah. So
that can be a time crunch too, right? It's Brian Keene was on our show, and he was talking about the horror show and how he had to end it. Like, it started off as like a once a week thing, and then it became more regular. And I think he told us he spent more time doing research on the show than he did writing. And he's like, it's time to stop this.
All the fallout of every controversial episode.
Oh, right. Yeah, exactly.
And mine was the slightest bit controversial. It was fine. It was like, I'm putting out a perfectly adequate product. I should focus on the stuff that I know I can do really well.
When we came up with the idea to do our show, well, initially we've said this before, but it was an accident. We did a live Facebook Q&A for our comic book that we were launching, and we got a couple hundred views, and then we were like, well, let's do it again the next week. Let's keep pushing this thing. And then a couple people asked to come on to like promote their stuff. And so, that's when we were like, well, screw it, let's do a podcast. And but I think from day one, we didn't want to just talk to other comic creators. We wanted to talk to authors and movie producers, directors, and so forth. And it's been an awesome couple months, getting the chance to talk to people like yourself and really talk in depth about, your your process, your background, those sort of things. Because even though a lot of people that follow us watch or read comic books, right? I think you can get a lot if you write comic books from prose authors as well, because telling a story is telling a story, right? So talking through the process and so forth is huge for some of these new aspiring writers that watch us. So, but I haven't read. Sorry, I'm going to bring it up again because I see the picture behind you there. I haven't read Clowns versus Spiders yet.
I'm trying.
It's always backwards.
In reverse. So
yeah. I'm absolutely going to read that, but can you give a quick synopsis of the story? It sounds batshit crazy, and I love it.
The story is that it was. I'll give you like the background of the book, because what I wanted to do was write the scariest clown book ever. And so I had the idea, and then I realized another book kind of had the same concepts. Like, all right, damn it. But while I was researching it, I found an article about how real life clowns were losing their livelihood because of all the scary clown stuff. Because they're like, we are here to bring joy to children. We go to parties, we entertain people. We're not, and all this scary clown crap is ruining our ability to make a living for ourselves. And I thought that's an interesting approach. Do a horror novel where the clowns are the good guys. And so I took a group of clowns who have lost their jobs because everyone thinks of clowns as Pennywise instead of Bozo the clown, but they still need to eat, and they get an offer to be scary clowns in a haunted house, and they reluctantly take it. They have to turn into their scary clown personas, which is what they most hate, but you have to make a living somehow. And while they're performing in the haunted house, the whole town is overrun by giant spiders, and it goes from there. And what I wanted it to be was something where you think, oh, that's going to be a really stupid book, and think, wow, that's actually good. It's goofy, it's a comedy, but I wanted you to think, wow, I cared about the characters, and there was suspense, and it wasn't just a cheesy B movie type thing. So I wanted to over deliver on the book, and
I'm sold. I have a huge to be read list here, but because of our show mainly. But man, I might have to bump that to the top. That sounds incredible. Yeah.
Now you've got 3 other hosts. I mean, you can.
That's true.
They're not.
Well, Ruggiero always gives me crap for how much I read. He doesn't understand how I have 2 kids at home.
I don't know how you can get the time for it. Like I still have a big pile there of books and comic books, and I just don't have the time for it.
I just suck at my day job,
Yeah.
Hopefully no one's watching from that.
But Jeff, you talk a lot about your rejections, and you come across as a very confident person. Is it because you know that what you do is good, or else you think that this is twisted? You do warped stuff. Like you think about things that people are not thinking on a daily basis. Like I love the story when you were talking about the guy who is a serial killer, but his mother doesn't want him to get COVID-19. That was hilarious, because oh my God, what kind of mind can create a script like that? Yeah. And easily, regarded as a crazy shit. And like, I don't want that. I don't want to publish that, but it's so good. And so your confidence comes from understanding people, the way people can interpret your work, or something else.
It comes from experience. 50 books in, I'm not like, oh man, everyone's going to hate book 51. I kind of, I know that I have a fan base, and I know that, it's not my books are not universally beloved, but I have a good fan base that lets me do this for a living. So I know that the people who like my books are, not every single book is like, oh yeah, this is going to be a 100% slam dunk, because I bounce around genres a little bit. Some are much more serious, some are much more goofy. Someone who really liked Pressure may not like Clowns versus Spiders, because that one is so kind of silly. But at 50 books in, you kind of know that there's a fan base for what I write. So in the early days, I didn't know. I did, my first book, Grave Robbers 1, No Experience Necessary. I sort of threw it out there and had no idea if people were going to like it or not. because a couple of the test readers did not like it. So I was like, okay, well, is the world going to agree with them or not? And fortunately, the world overall didn't. But, any book I publish, there's going to be 1 star. This is the worst piece of crap I've ever read, which happens with every book. Every book is going to have people who actively despise it, but hopefully it's going to have people who also like it. And the confidence just comes from having been, I'm a long way from being a newbie. My first book came out in 2000. So 21 years of published books later, I can be relatively comfortable that, my book Deathless just came out, and so far all that has hit is the hardcover limited edition. The paperback and ebook editions will be out the end of November. I'm a little nervous because it's a sequel to one of my most popular books, Pressure, but I'm experienced enough. I've read the book. I've had the beta reader feedback. I'm comfortable that it's not going to be a universal, wow, this book is a piece of garbage. People are presumably going to like, now that you may play this clip back when it's my first colossal failure, but just it comes from experience and that comfort level. And there's always that little nagging, this could be the one, but it's a fake nagging. It's not a objective viewpoint saying this is going to fail. It's probably going to be fine.
It's not a full-blown imposter syndrome. It's more of like just a little tiny voice, saying that. Yeah.
It's really hard for me to relate to imposter syndrome because I started out with ebooks in 2000, and now everyone has a Kindle. People like ebooks. In 2000, people actively despised ebooks. They hated the thought of it. No one read ebooks unless they were other ebook authors. So I started so small that, when you've been beaten down that much, when you publish books and it's like, oh, those aren't real books, there is no imposter syndrome when people say, oh yeah, you suck. Because imposter syndrome is, what if they realize I suck? When people are saying you suck, you can't really have the imposter syndrome. It took so long for me to, probably the first 5 years of my career, I didn't have a book that people thought was a quote unquote real book. And then it wasn't until 2009 that I had a mass market release where you could go into bookstores and get it. So my progress was so slow that imposter syndrome doesn't really work for me in most cases, just because I was always told, no, your stuff sucks. Not the book themselves, just the format in which they were delivered.
Gotcha. Yeah, well, that kind of leads to another question as far as how much has changed over these past 20 plus years, right? I wouldn't say that I would have thought quality wise an ebook would be worse. I just wanted a physical book in my hand. I had a Kindle and I used it from time to time, but I would always find myself wanting to go, this is before I ordered books on Amazon, want to go to the bookstore, which anyone watching, you support your local bookstores, you get out there and get books there if you can. But how much has changed on that front? You're obviously well into your career at this point. You've had success, but for someone that's just starting out, what sort of advice could you give? As far as the approach, going self-published or
massive changes from when I started. Because when I started, it was simple. You write a novel, get an agent. The agent sells the book to a real publisher. And that was basically how it worked. And everyone agreed that was the way you did it. And if someone self-published when I started, they, what's wrong with you? They were the people who would be on panels and talk over everyone else because, oh, well, I know what I'm doing. Like everyone would just roll their eyes at them. Self-publishing when I started, it was not a viable option in any way. And they were called vanity presses, and you didn't do it. And so for the first a little less than half of my career, the goal was to have, a book in bookstores. And so my steps, it was universally agreed upon that a small press book was inferior to a big press book. And that's just the way it worked. And everyone agreed on that. You didn't publish with a small press and say, I'm better than those of you who are with Random House, because you knew you weren't. And then I finally broke through. I had my first real book. Everyone agreed that it was a real book. You could go into bookstores and there it was on the shelves. I was with Leisure Books. And around then, things were starting to change. Self-publishing was just starting to become a little bit more credible because of the Kindle, because Amazon had their program. But I was not into it at all. And I had collaborated on a book called Suckers with Joe Conrad. And he, started his career. The only way to do it is to have a traditionally published book. He was with Hyperion. His books were in the bookstores, and that was the only way to do it. Then he experimented with self-publishing, and then he suddenly did a 180 shift where, no, the way to do it is self-publishing. That is the way to go. And he said, we need to self-publish Suckers. And I said, absolutely not. I will not have that stain on my career. You're with Hyperion. You can do it because, you're getting 6-figure advances. I'm not. There's just no possibility that I will do that. And I didn't. And so I did Pressure with Leisure, and then I did Dweller with Leisure. And with Dweller, Leisure was kind of almost done. There was no promo. They only stocked one copy, spine out. It was released. It was in bookstores, but barely. And then they were supposed to publish Wolf Hunt. And about 4 months before Wolf Hunt came out, they ended their horror line.
Oh, yeah.
It isn't coming out. And so lots of leisure authors were just deeply screwed. And so I had a werewolf book. And I thought, okay, I've spent the past year saying, I'm writing Wolf Hunt for leisure books. It's a real book. How badly can it really impact me if I try self-publishing this one? Everyone knows it's a real book. I've shared the cover. Review copies have gone out. I don't want to spend 2 years trying to find a publisher for a werewolf book. And this was around 2010 when the horror market wasn't as healthy as it was now. So he was like, there's really no hope for a werewolf book. So it was like, what? Let's do it. Let's get it out there, see what happens. It's not going to come back to haunt me because everyone knows it used to be. It made it through the gatekeepers, just then the gatekeepers disappeared. So my wife, Lynn Hansen, at the time, now she's a very extremely successful full-time cover artist. At the time, she had just done some graphic design for her day job, but she was like, let me try to do a Wolf Hunt cover. And so she did. I learned how to format, which was a nightmare. Now it's pretty easy. Now I kind of you can upload it and it pretty much takes it as is. But back then it was just this maddening, why can't I get these Italian work or whatever? So I spent a long time learning that. Self-published Wolf Hunt. The next month it was like, oh my God, that's the best business decision I ever made. And it sold fewer copies than it would have through Leisure, but it was the difference between 70% royalties and 6% royalties.
Right.
Wow.
And when you carry the fan base from Pressure and Dweller over to Wolf Hunt, even if the sales are less, the money is way more. And suddenly I was like, wait a minute, there's potential for full-time writing in this. Did you find more artistic freedom in that self-publishing process too than working with a traditional publisher? Like, could you be a little bit more avant-garde or so than you make? Because Wolf Hunt had already gone through the edits. It was already a traditionally published book. Okay. I already had to jump through all the hoops to get it published traditionally. So that book, I didn't change it. The marketing department, I came up with a bunch of different titles, and I stuck with what the marketing department came up. Wolf Hunt wasn't my title. That was Leisure's title, but I ended up just sticking with it. But I didn't really, I was like, now I can do the, author's cut. I just sort of kept the book the way it had been written because I was happy with it. Later, I would, embrace the idea that I could just write in whatever genre I want.
Yeah.
And so
I think that's something that's appealing for a lot of like indie comic creators right now is they can pull off crazy stuff that, Marvel's beholden to shareholders and DC and those guys. So they have to kind of toe line where indies, we can do anything we want because we don't answer to anybody. So I was wondering if the same thing kind of feeling transpired into the prose world too. And
to a degree.
Yeah.
The challenge is that this is my full-time living now. So I quit my day job a few years ago, and the only money that goes into my bank account is through my creative work. And there's a massive difference in sales if I do a horror novel than if I try to cheat on that genre. So I did a book called Kumquat, which is a romantic comedy. It's one of my favorite of my own books. The people who've actually read it agree that it's one of their favorites. A lot of the reviews are, I cannot imagine that I would have enjoyed a romantic comedy as much as I enjoyed Kumquat. If you like my books, it is very distinctly one of my books. The same sense of humor, the same kind of goofy tone. It's just not a horror novel. Sales were crap. And I can't have books where sales are crap if I want to continue to not have a day job. So there is a market thing where not wanting to crawl back to MetLife forces me to make decisions on, what is going to sell. And it means that I can, take risks, but then I have to sort of follow up with something less risky. So if I do a book like The Writing Life, nonfiction, which I thought that's probably a pretty limited audience. Readers loved it, but it didn't sell very well. But then I had to follow that, with Deathless, the sequel to Pressure. And it doesn't have to be a, sequel. I don't do cynical, I would never want to write a Wolf Hunt 3, but I better to pay the bills. It's, it's every book I completely stand by creatively, but it's, the horror stuff is what sells. If I do a book like Autumn Bleeds into Winter, I've got a track history. I can, track record enough that I know that book is going to sell at the level I need it to keep me from crawling back to a day job. So I can do kumquats, but I have to follow them with something like Autumn Bleeds into Winter. I can take the risk, but then I have to follow it up with something safer so that I can continue to do what I love for a living.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, strategically, you got to plan that out there. So you mentioned, and I didn't even realize this, that so you said you just quit your day job in the last handful of years. So that's got to be pretty inspiring to a lot of writers out there. Is that you put out that body of work while you were still doing it as a second job. Although, as most of us would say, that's our first job, and our regular job's our second job.
Well, but, I could have been promoted dozens of times. Like, no, I will not be promoted. Like, why are you still here? When I was at my day job, I did the best work I could. I always got good reviews. I gave those 8 hours to my day job, but that was not what I wanted to do. And I absolutely did not want to move into management positions or anything where I was like, well, maybe instead of a writer, I'm a supervisor. No, I will not let that happen. I didn't want a day job that I hated, but I absolutely did not want to climb the corporate ladder and suddenly think, do I even want to be a writer anymore? No, I want to be a writer. But it was certainly nice to have the, payday every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Right.
Writing, you don't really know what you're going to get. And when I work, a corporate day job, it's like, I know exactly to the penny how much money is going to my bank account on the 15th of the month. So
that's it, right? Like, I mean, when I'm writing now, I know I have that, like, I have a pretty decent day job, right? So behind this banner is my work computer. I'll just turn around when I have any time and I'll sit there and write some of, whatever story I'm trying to write. And there's not really much stress because I'm not dependent on that income. So I can imagine, what it must have taken to go to that level. But what did your day look like when you were still doing the day job, to kind of give some insight to people out there, such as myself? Obviously you talk to a lot of authors and they say, you just got to write, you got to write. Was there a set schedule of your writing time, or were you just legit lunch break, right? Before bed, I'm writing what I can,
It was basically giving up evenings and weekends for a long chunk of time, because you said it was inspiring, and in some ways it's inspiring, but I always feel bad because, a new writer will come up and, how long did it take you to quit your day job? How long did it take? It's like, well, it took 15 years and about 35 books. I was like, oh, okay, that's not the answer I wanted to hear. The better answer is, I sold my first book for a 6-figure advance and then quit my job. But mine is the slow baby steps type thing.
Yeah.
So I didn't work on my lunch break. I admire the people who do, where it's like, when I had my 45 minutes for lunch, I wrote. My job was generally pretty intense. There was lots of brain power focus. It was focused on numbers. So it didn't take creative energy, but it took lots of brain power. So I needed that 45 minutes to just get the hell away from my desk. So I would, walk somewhere for lunch every day. So I didn't really write at lunch. But when I got home, I would, instead of saying, I'm going to enjoy watching some horror movies, it was like, no, I'm going to sit here and write. And Friday and Saturday, or Saturday and Sunday, were generally writing days. So, and not to the exclusion of any joy in my life. It wasn't like, all right, I'm going to write 16 hours on Saturday and 16 hours on Sunday, because that's what it takes. But, there were lots of times where it's like, boy, it sure would be nice to live the life where I leave work at 5 and then just enjoy the evening and then enjoy my weekends. And it's like, well, no, that's not the way it works. But it was not to the exclusion of anything fun in my life. It just, anytime you have a creative endeavor that's not paying the bills right away, you're giving up a lot of time. So if you want to play guitar, you don't get to play guitar as your day job. So you're spending Friday night learning to play the guitar, and any kind of creative endeavor or any kind of thing that doesn't pay the bills right away, you're giving up a lot of your free time to do it. So it's good if you're doing something you like. I'm not writing thinking, oh, this sucks.
Right.
Oh, what a horrible, horrible day. I'd rather be, putting up drywall or something. I enjoy writing. I enjoy the process of writing. I enjoy having written more than I enjoy writing, but I do enjoy writing. So it wasn't just, all these evenings and weekends of hell, but it was not, I just get to play video games all weekend. I gave up video games in favor of writing. And you kind of just have to do that. You have to write evenings, write weekends, or have a day job where they don't care if you goof off during company time. Unfortunately, my first corporate day job, they didn't care. It was, here's an in bin. When you leave for the day, this in bin needs to be empty. If that in bin is empty when you leave, everything's good. You can do whatever you want. It's like, this is the miracle. But then eventually the department died and I had to move someplace else. At my job at MetLife, it was just nonstop. There was never any downtime, so I couldn't goof off at work. But that year, the year of as long as the in bin is empty when you leave, you can do whatever you want. I got so much stuff done.
Yeah, probably crank and then just have all that extra time to try to write.
I kind of have a job like that with I kind of have the in-bin job right now.
Yeah, you do.
Sometimes I feel like I should be doing something different, but
it was
John and I always talk about, like when you have your job, there's a pinnacle, like you were saying earlier about going into management and stuff, right? There's a pinnacle that you could go with that career, but it goes further away from what your passions are. So you kind of got to land somewhere in the middle, but I think nerfing more towards the passion, because the more advancement you take in those corporate worlds, you kind of get further and further away from the passion. So it's kind of an interesting situation to be in, and you got to think about that mentally and kind of weigh those options. And it's like, do I really want to head towards the corporate, climb the ladder, big fire, sure thing, or do I kind of still want to keep one foot on this side of the track and stay with my passion? So I think that's a real battle that a lot of people face and think about. Right. So,
and I've known people, and it's like, it's steady income, and then you get the promotion, and that's even more steady income, and it's like, maybe this is the way to go. Maybe the steady income model, the insurance model, is better than the writing model. And some people drift away, and sometimes they're happy about it, and sometimes it's like, yes, I gave up my writing dream, but financial security. I don't wake up at night dreading whether my next book will sell or not. And it's kind of individual choices, but you can always sort of do a do-over. You can always, it's not like sports. If you gave up on your football dream, I can't be a football player. I could never be a football player. But even if I were built like a football player, at my age, it's over. But you can always be a writer. You can be a writer when you're 90.
Yeah. I want to get a question in a second, but I just wanted to, when I said earlier that can inspire a lot of people, right, that you were doing that during your day job, I think there's two types of people. There's the people like myself that would find that as inspiration, because to a lot of us creatives, it's a passion. And we talk about that on the show all the time. It's like, you're going into this not trying to necessarily get rich. Sure, we want to get rich. That would be amazing. You make a ton of money, but we go to bed at night, and if we didn't write or draw or do something creative, it's like we feel like we let ourselves down that day, right? And you got to have that drive. So the fact that you were able to maintain that steady day job while still pursuing your passion and becoming successful, you know, that's what I find as an inspiration. Whereas you mentioned, you know, someone would say, wow, really? It took you 15 years? Like, I don't want to do this anymore. And it's like, well, then, you know, I mean, maybe you shouldn't pursue this if it's all about money. I mean, there's a lot of authors out there.
If you don't enjoy the process of writing, it's not the best career for you because it can take a long time to succeed.
Yeah, yeah.
So question, Lionel Ray Green popped up a question that I just asking. Which of your characters do you feel most connected to? I misread it when it popped up because I thought it was which character in Dweller do you feel most connected to? Now I have to,
me too. That's what
I had formulated the answer in my mind, and now I have to come up with another one. The question was, I guess it'll be people watching this will see it, so I don't actually have to read it out loud.
No.
Because you write outstanding female characters like Allison, I'm curious if your answer will be a female character. That's actually a really difficult question. I'm going to go with the answer I had formulated, which was in Dweller. The character I most connect to, because Dweller is basically a tragedy about bad decisions, and I think his wife's name was Melanie, and I'm embarrassing myself if I don't remember my own character name, but that happens a lot. Where even while I'm writing, like, what was that character's name? Flipping back, I believe that the main character Toby's wife's name is Melanie, and she's kind of the one saying, "You need to get your shit together," like. And that's kind of where I am. Like, I would be the character saying, Toby, this is stupid. Don't do this. You're headed toward disaster. So I kind of relate to the she wasn't a grumpy character, but the more rational type character, as opposed to Toby, who is ruled purely by emotions and it goes badly for him. To answer the actual question he asked, which was not which character in Dweller do you most relate to, but which of your characters do you most relate to? It's actually really, that should be an easy question to answer because I have so many characters and I'm just completely drawing a blank. Very few characters are based on me. And even a book like Kumquat, where that one I purposely said, I'm going to take a lot of anecdotes from my real life and put them in there. But the character's not me. The character's kind of neurotic and I'm not neurotic. And, you know, I tend to write comedic characters and I try to write deeply flawed characters. And I myself am deeply flawed, but my characters are not deeply flawed in the same way that I am. And so there aren't many characters I've written that are avatars for Jeff Strand. It's generally characters that I create. And a lot of it is, what would I do in this situation? How would I try to get out of this? Which I think makes the characters believable. But as far as any one character who is close to me, I'm going to go ahead and say the main character in Kumquat, whose name I've forgotten because, like I said, I cannot remember my own character's name. I would have studied if I had known this question was coming up.
And with 50 plus books, I don't think it would be possible to remember each character in every book. I don't
schools a lot. And kids can't like, wait a minute, you don't remember your own characters? We just got tested on this and you can't even remember it? So
if you have more than 3 kids, it's hard to
I mess my own kid names up. I call my kid my dog name. You know, like what?
Yeah, I can't remember my kids. I always get their names mixed up.
I only have
that was
2.
a terrible answer, and I apologize to Lionel for my inept babbling through his insightful question.
Well, hey, we can just go with the first question that we thought it was, right? Specific to Dweller. So
if this wasn't live, I would say, can we cut that part out? But we just have to go for it.
Yeah.
It's very hard to just say, I don't know.
That's what I should have said. Lionel, I don't know. Let's move on.
Yeah, people don't like to say that for some
don't
reason.
Try to trick me.
I hate saying I don't know anything, even to anybody, even if my kid asks me something embarrassing. It's
not a good technique when you're on a show and people are asking you questions. You're, I don't know. Like,
make something. We
didn't invite you as a guest for you to just blow off our questions.
Yeah, well, that's what they expect here at this show. That's the kind of the level that we bring. Is just a bunch of shenanigans. So that's what we do. Yeah.
Hey, don't be bashing our show here. That's not how we are. No,
it's self-deprecating. That's how we roll.
No, but even with our day jobs, right? Like Joel and I work for the same company. That's how we met each other. And if we told a client we didn't know, we'd get our heads ripped off. So yeah.
I did not have
I
that.
don't know,
option.
but let me get the answer for you. That's what you do. Right. So I don't know.
That's
what
true.
the answer.
All powerful, all knowledgeable.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. There you go.
Oh, look at
So
that.
Bridget's here to bail us out. So she tells us it's Todd who is the main character in Kumquat. Thanks, Bridget.
Did she know that, or did that just did she pull up a copy of the book?
Yeah, Google's a
That'll
good
be-
thing. Google. You just,
Yeah.
Technically, the book was probably behind me. I could have done that, but that would have been disrespectful to be shuffling through my bookshelves.
Hey, we've had guests do that before. It's okay.
Well, I want to be your best guest. I want you to say, "Wow, I wish all guests could be up to Jeff's level."
That's
Yep.
There you go.
Oh,
So-
I was wrong. I got Melanie wrong. I think Melanie was from some other book.
Oh, okay.
Oh,
She
Brid-
said she
Bridget
knew. We'll
just
have to
knew.
believe her.
So my
Yeah.
readers are smarter than I am. That's true.
Well, job done, right? That's the goal, right? So hopefully,
That's
so,
right.
yeah.
Well, hey,
Excellent.
it's like the story Misery, right? I mean, the faithful readers are going to know the ins and outs of the stories, and
Right.
I feel like sometimes it can even, I forget who we had on that said this, but a fan pointed out something in a plot to one of the authors we talked to, and the author was like, "That wasn't even in my head, but that's great." Yes, like that.
Oh,
That's exactly.
A lot. Accidental genius.
Yeah. That's awesome. So we talked offline. Obviously, one of the things you like to do, you mentioned you don't, well, now that you're writing full time, you might have a little more spare time. You gave up video games, which I'm right there with you. I bought a PlayStation 5 when it came out, and it's been played like 3 times. So
I play video games. I used to write a column for a site called Just Adventure because I love computer adventure games. The one where it's problem solving story, and I get addicted, and it's like, I'm just going to play for 30 minutes and then I'll get back to work. It's like, oh, well, I can't stop until I solve this puzzle. Okay, I solved the puzzle. But wait, I've just opened up this whole new area and now I need to explore that. And then suddenly it's 4 a.m. and it's like, oh, I should probably go to bed because I have to get up in 2 hours. So I basically, like an alcoholic who destroys all the beer bottles, I was like, done. No more video games for me. I play Words with Friends on my phone, and that is the extent of it, because otherwise, instead of introducing me as the author of over 50 books, you would introduce me as the author of 3 books from long, long ago and say, well, how's your day job going? It's like, well, it sucks. So video game
Yeah, that's a real thing. People got to give up some of that extracurricular stuff. And that was going to actually kind of lead me to one of my questions I was going to ask Jeff is how are you able to be so prolific? So we can say, negate video games, right, as one, but is there some tips and tricks that you kind of are able to put out that volume of work in such I consider a short period of time, but what's some things that you found that work and maybe don't work?
Just set reasonable daily goals for yourself. One of the things that people do is like, I'm going to write 6,000 words a day. And if I don't write 6,000 words a day, I have to make it up the next day. And then very quickly it's overwhelming and you quit. So you set a reasonable goal, something that you can do. If you have a day job and 3 kids, you're probably not going to be cranking out writing for 6 hours a day. So you come up with what you think you can do, and you don't punish yourself for not making your goal. The goal resets each day. You also don't reward yourself for overwriting. So if you have a really good day, you don't subtract from the next day's goal. And then because consistency is the key. And you don't beat yourself up if on a certain day you don't make your goal. But yeah, I think that setting reasonable goals is a way to do it, whether there are time goals or word count goals. I tend to go with word count goals, but time goals are just, depending on what works for you. If you say, I'm going to write for an hour a day, or I'm going to write for 30 minutes a day or whatever, if you write 1 page a day, that's 365 pages in a year. That's a novel. So you can write a novel in a page a day. So a lot of times people who look insanely prolific, you say, my God, that person is a machine. If you do the math, it's not, they can be complete slackers. It doesn't take that many that much writing a day to write a book in a year. So a lot of times writers are just sort of lazy and unmotivated, and they look more prolific than they are, or they look the same amount of prolific. But when you do the math, it's like, wait a minute, that's not that impressive.
Well, yeah, you do the math. That's about 2 to 3 books a year that you're getting out there, right? I mean, if you have over 50 books in 20 plus years, so. But yeah, I guess it really depends on the person, right? I mean, but I think what you're saying as far as having a goal, whether it's word count or time, I mean, have a goal either way, right? I don't, I have set times of the day where little blocks where I can write. So there's no word count or page count or whatever. It's just write as much as you can during that hour or 2 hours that you got. But do you, when you're writing, do you just crack your knuckles and go right into that, or do you have any sort of exercises you do to get the words flowing in your brain first, or how does that look?
Just get into it, except for I will usually start by rewriting what I did the day before. If it's a novel, if it's a short story, I'm starting from scratch usually. But if it's a novel, I just, okay, where did I stop? Yes. What did I write yesterday? I'm going to start from there, and then just sort of, so it gets me back into the mood of the piece. I don't tend to write in long sessions. And it's not like that I get distracted. I can't sit down and write for 7 hours. Like, wow, where did all the time go? Look at the clock. I'm aware of how much time I'm writing. So I will go on Facebook and Twitter and that kind of stuff, check email. I'm aware of what's going on around me. I don't generally get into the zone where I'm just fully immersed. I'm focusing on lots of stuff at once, but it's kind of just, I don't really even have a set amount. When I had the day job, I had sort of the set amount where it's like, okay, I'm home, I'm going to write until dinner and then probably be done. And then on Saturday and Sunday, write unless we had other plans. But now it's kind of get up and just sort of pretty much work all day, except that I'm not actively typing on a book all day. I'm just at my computer all day unless I have something else planned outside the house. And there's always this goal of, from now on, I'm only going to write until 5 p.m. That never works. I generally write up until not too soon before bed. So I kind of do full work days. But again, it's not like, wow, he writes for 13 hours, solid hours a day. I'm writing much less than that, but I am at my computer doing stuff all day.
I remember when we talked to Alan Baxter, he would say when he's like in the middle of writing, his office door would be open and he'd just be sitting there like staring at the ceiling, and his wife would walk by and be like, oh, he's writing, I gotta leave him alone. He's like thinking out a plot point or something. So even when you're not writing, you're writing, right? It's I don't know, you find yourself sitting there laying in bed and you're like, that's it, that's the piece, like I gotta go, I gotta get that in there.
Yeah, and what happens is that's it, that's the piece, and then wake up the next morning,
forget it.
What was it? Was it brilliant? Or I write it down, and then in the morning it's like, what was that? That was a 2 a.m. solution that makes no sense whatsoever. So I don't really solve a lot of problems in the middle of the night. They tend to be, okay, this character is totally screwed. How do I get them out of that? I'm going to go for a long walk until I solve the problem. Then I come back with the solution. So there aren't that many eureka middle of the night solutions. It's generally the go for a walk and figure it out type solutions.
I've made this joke before on the show, but my wife will be like, oh, did you remember to call this place today or take the trash out? And I'll be like, no, but I thought of this really cool scene in this story that I was so excited about. It's like, there's a real world too, John. But I don't know. I feel when you have that side of your brain that's just like constantly cranking, it's hard to turn it off sometimes. Do you find yourself like when you're like watching a movie or reading someone else's book, do you find yourself critiquing a bit more now that you're in that field, or do you just turn off the switch and just enjoy it for what it is?
Weirdly, I'm able to turn off the switch. I can read a book just as a book without focusing on oh, I see what foreshadowing technique they're using because that's the same thing I would have done. It's weird. I can read a book like I'm not a writer. I never, for whatever reason, lost the ability to just lose myself in a book, which is nice. And I can watch a movie as a movie. Obviously, if you watch lots of movies and read lots of books, you can, there are tricks that you are aware of. But from the writing standpoint, I can fully enjoy a work of art just as a work of art and not as a fellow creator. So
great. Yeah. Well, so obviously, horror and comedy are two areas that you likely enjoy. You write them, so I'm assuming you do. What other genres do you enjoy when it comes to movies and books?
I'm pretty much a very big horror comedy person. Not horror movies, comedies. I do like action movies, but 90% of the time, if I'm watching something, it's a horror movie. Although what has happened now actually is that TV shows on streaming are in many cases better than movies.
Mm-hmm.
So I discovered that I'll get into something like Ozark, the crime thrillers, something like Ozark or Breaking Bad or Better Call Saul or any of those. I will get into those more than I get into any movie. So a lot of the time, it's like, what is your chosen viewing genre? It is kind of the weird serialized crime thriller kind of shit. As far as books go, I like horror, I like humor, and I also just like straightforward mainstream novels.
Okay. When you mentioned Breaking Bad, I was going to say Breaking Bad. I was lucky enough to not watch that show until the season right before the final season was starting. So my wife and I got to straight up binge that on Netflix all the way through, right until the last season. And then the last season we had to wait every single week for the episode, and we're sitting there like, come on, let's go. But yeah, I'm right there with you. I mean, TV quality these days is just through the roof with all the streaming and HBO series. Like, you can just tell such a better story over 8 episodes.
Thinking it'd be getting worse. You would say, well, how come shows, if now that there are 10,000 times more shows than there ever were, why aren't they bad? And probably there are lots of bad ones, but I'm hearing, it's very rare that I'll just be flipping through Netflix and say, well, that looks interesting. Maybe I'll check that out. It's always through word of mouth. So I'm going with the stuff that other people have recommended to me. So that's probably why there's probably tons and tons of crap out there. But I think one of the best things to happen to TV were the much shorter seasons. So instead of spinning your wheels over 24 episodes, if they're doing 8 to 10 episodes, it's just content. So
there's no filler episodes, right? Yeah. I didn't mean to Joel popped that question up there, but if I don't say my thought, I'm gonna forget it. So
that's okay. I'm trying to time it, so I try to fit it in, but that's okay. No worries. Yeah. So Lionel was wondering, well, he complimented me, so thank you, Lionel. I appreciate that. Which book of yours, Jeff, would you most want to see adapted into a comic book if you were to go into sequential?
I feel like Wolf Hunt would probably be one of the most fun ones. Helps that there are 3 books in the series, so you've got 3 full arcs, so you could get a good 15 to 18 issues out of it. Lots of humor, lots of action, lots of werewolf gore. I think that would be my unlike your previous question where my mind just went, I don't know. I think Wolf Hunt's a very easy.
You could have said, I don't know, again, and just kept on theme. That would have been kind of funny. So.
No, this is my redemption.
All right.
Lionel Ray Green. The answer to your question is Wolf Hunt.
Yeah, that. Hey, and like I said earlier, I mean, from the books I've read, the majority of them would really work in that world just because of the style, So, Wolf Hunt is on my to be read, so I will read that as well. I'm gonna be busy. We have like 2 shows a week, and we talk to a lot of authors, and I've read a lot of their work. I try to invite people on that I've read and enjoy, so I know up front, like, hey, this is someone I already read, right? Which was the case with yourself. So, but there's a lot of books to be read, and 2 kids to try to raise while I'm doing that. So
Oh,
My kids aren't
excuses.
my kids aren't at the age where I can sit there and read a book on the couch on a Sunday morning while they're just playing. It's daddy, 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 and trying to slap the book out of my hand, But
I guess
yeah.
you have to be a good parent sometimes. That's
sometimes, yeah. Well, and I can't really read the books I read to my kids out loud.
Don't read Wolfhunt to them out loud.
I did read Goosebumps.
Word.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I read Goosebumps to my 7-year-old, and he's really into horror for the stuff he's seen so far. But which tangent, which happens on the show a lot. Have any of you guys, besides myself, heard of Siren Head?
Yeah.
No.
You have?
No.
Yeah. Last year, Siren Head is a character. It's a big one. It's a giant with a siren in the place of his head. Yeah, my kid was crazy about it.
My son is like obsessed with it. He's like, we're driving by and we see it's like, like the head's like a telephone pole or something. It's so stupid. Like but I had never heard of it. And we're driving by and he's like, is that a telephone pole? And I'm like, yeah. And he goes, it looks like Siren Head. I'm like, who the hell is Siren Head? And why do you even know about him? And which made me realize I got to watch his YouTube history. But they talk about it at school. He's like running through the woods. He's afraid a Siren Head's going to come get him. I'm like, that's not real, man. He's like, yes, it is. And I'm like, no, it's not. There's no walking telephone poles.
But like I was happy with that. I'm worried about now because now he's 6 and his interests have gone beyond that kind of Siren Head stuff. Have you seen I think the series called Round 6?
No,
I have not.
Yeah, there's a Japanese or a Korean doll is a giant, and there's a big camp with all the prisoners in, and they are supposed to have a game with that giant doll. And I saw a doll, and he was watching it. I was okay, but that doll was that was a game. That doll was kind of killing people with machine guns. Before I could find this, the doll killed around 20 people, and he was watching in amazement.
Oh no,
loving it. Say that's not for your age. And I'm 6 now. I'm a man. I don't like Siren Head anymore. No.
We thought we had my son's tablet, blocked to an extent, right? But we let him watch like 15-20 minutes a couple nights a week before bed. I try to read him books too. I read him Goosebumps and whatnot. But my wife was standing outside his door and she heard like beep 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 beep, like blocking out cursing, and she's like, "What?" And she goes in. He's cracking up. He's watching an episode of Cops, and I'm like, "What? How does he even find Cops?" And then there was another time where I heard him cracking up, and I go in and he turned his tablet down. I'm like, "What are you doing, man? Like, you're 7. Like, that's when you're a teenager. That's when you try to hide what you're watching." He was explaining to me that he was watching a video game of these guys jumping out of cars in parachutes, and he starts explaining it to me, and I'm like, "Is that Grand Theft Auto?" And I pull it up. I'm like, "Oh my god!" I'm like, "All right, no more tablet. Like, you're done." And he didn't understand the concept of why it was so bad, but I'm like, there better not have been any hooker scenes that he just watched. So, anyways, that was a tangent on Siren Head. I just popped in my head.
Yeah, it's a funny thing because we have put sex away, from kids, from TV, from advertisements, but violence goes wild at any time. Like, if you're not prepared, your kid's gonna watch something really gruesome on TV, and that's something even more worrying than watching somebody naked, for example.
To this day, I watched Nightmare on Elm Street when I was in 1st grade, and my dad didn't care if I watched horror movies, which I'm thankful for now because I'm so obsessed with horror. But looking back, I'm like, well, that wasn't probably a good decision. I'm not gonna let my son watch that. But if there was a sex scene, he'd be like, "Cover your eyes." And now, at the time, it didn't make sense to me, but now I'm like, wait a minute, I could watch someone get their head cut off, but as soon as there's a set of breasts on the TV, it's like, cover your eyes. It's just funny that that is there. But speaking of Nightmare on Elm Street, though, Jeff, what horror inspired you to go that path? Is there something specifically you recall as a kid that you read or watched that was like, oh my God, this is what I want to do?
No, it was the opposite. I didn't like horror at all as a kid. I liked comedy. So it was magazines like Bananas, which was actually R.L. Stine wrote for it, but it was a really silly humor magazine for little kids. That kind of stuff. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, all
Nice.
that kind of stuff. I liked, the Beverly Cleary books, which were a lot of times comedies. All that stuff is what I liked. I didn't like horror at all, either reading or watching. I didn't get into horror until I was in high school, and then I full on horror fanatic. But it was up until I was probably 16, I was just a humor fan. I wanted to write humor. I had no interest in writing horror. Then I made some friends in high school who were into horror, and then I well, let's give this Stephen King guy a try. I was like, oh my God, this guy's a genius. And okay, well, now that I've read every Stephen King book, who's this Dean Koontz guy? Oh my God, I like him just as much, and read every Dean Koontz book. And so then I became, then I started to expand a little bit more, in college, like, okay, let's Richard Lehman and all those more obscure ones. But it was, the Stephen King was the standard entryway, and that was mine.
Yeah.
And just, my friends, we didn't date. So on weekends, we would rent 5 or 6 horror movies and just stay up all night watching those. So I watched, in my high school years, I watched a huge number of movies in very little time. And in college, it's amazing how much free time I had in college as opposed to now. So it was, every weekend, just bring home a big pile of videos from the store and, watch horror movies. So I watched so there was no one specific movie that changed my life. It was just, absorbing lots and lots and lots of content over a very short period of time was just, okay, this is what I want to do.
That's great. Yeah. I always ask that because like I read Goosebumps. I'm younger, Goosebumps probably wouldn't have been something that,
No, I'm way too old for Goosebumps.
Yeah, well,
I'm too old for Goosebumps.
I didn't want to say, as soon as I started the sentence, I'm like, man, I sound like I'm calling this guy old.
Okay, old person.
Yeah. As soon as I started
that, you can't relate to.
That sentence started. I'm like, shit. So no, but I read that. I wasn't, into it too long because I did advance to Stephen King and I read it in 8th grade, and that's what made me fall in love with horror like completely. But I said this to Brian Keene. He is who opened up my world to other horror authors, because I was strictly Keene up until college, and then I was like, I need to, there's other horror out there, and I went to a bookstore and I found The Rising, and I read that. I'm like, wow, this is good. And then, so I started, expanding, what I was doing. And then obviously once the internet was already there. When social media came around, I followed him on Twitter and he would talk about other authors. And that's how I found a lot of, other horror authors, which, to be honest, in turn probably led me to discovering you too, because it just branches out, and you start to find these other authors. And now, man, I can't even, looking back, I'm like, I'm so stupid for just, reading one author for so many years.
I'm sure
yeah.
I appreciated it.
Oh, well, I'm sure my one sale, probably he doesn't know me from anyone else. I wish he did, but
I'll
but yeah,
I knew him.
Hey, I would take that. But yeah. So you got me all flustered now. Someone else talk. Yeah.
All right. So I always like asking people this question, Jeff. So when you're not writing, what are some of the things that you enjoy doing when you're able to have some downtime? Like, is there other hobbies and things you're into besides writing?
I like road trips a lot. We just got back from West Virginia.
Oh, nice.
Lynn Hansen and I, the Horror Writers Association West Virginia chapter just formed. And so Bridget Nelson had set up an event at a haunted house, which took place at the Haunted Majestic, which is basically a World War II ship. And they have the haunted house on there.
Awesome.
Oh wow.
And she asked if we would go to be part of that big event. Like, yeah.
Heck
So,
yeah.
but if we were going to drive up to West Virginia, we were going to turn it into a full-on vacation. So we were there Wednesday through Sunday, and we did great restaurants. We got to go to Hillbilly Hot Dogs, which is one of the greatest places on earth. It
Sounds
basically
like it.
it's hot dogs in a junkyard setting. It is. You can spend hours there just looking at the environment.
Awesome.
They go all out. We went to, I think, 8 different haunted houses.
Oh, that's awesome.
We toured the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum,
Oh
which
wow.
now they wouldn't call it the Lunatic Asylum. Back then, they called it the Lunatic Asylum. We toured the criminally insane section. So we had a really, really good time. Ice cream, hot dogs. Yeah. We found a place called, we went to the Mothman Museum.
Wow.
Yes.
We got pictured by the Mothman statue. We went to a place called Ice Cream Sundays, which had horror movie themed Sundays, like a Killer Clowns from Outer Space Sunday that had popcorn and bubble gum and candy on it. I got the Texas Chainsaw Massacre Sunday, which had, strawberry ice cream and donut, and we had a really good time. So we love road trips. We went to Asheville about a month ago with Rich Dansky and also Bridget Nelson. And, I love going to conventions. So a lot of it is writing adjacent because we do these things a lot of times with fellow writers, but going to conventions, going to StokerCon, Scares of Care, KillerCon, Nikon, all that stuff. That is how I recharge. So, the year of pandemic, way more than a year, because I lost about 2 years worth of events. That was miserable because I was like, I need to see my fellow horror writer friends. And everything was on Zoom for a while, which, obviously this is delightful, but it wouldn't compare to the 4 of us sitting in a room having this same chat. So
absolutely.
Oh, there'd be cigars and whiskey and all kinds of shenanigans off scene that you couldn't see that would be going on. So
I was
all kinds of good
missing
stuff.
all that, but that's why I love, road trips, conventions, and that I like, movies, reading, that kind of stuff. No video game.
There's a cool website called Atlas Obscura. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but it kind of shows you the weird places throughout the world. And like, if you're in different states and towns, you can go to Atlas Obscura and look it up, and it will show you like just weird, I don't know, could be supernatural things that have happened in the town or just interesting sites. So that's cool. If you travel out, you can kind of
remember that.
Like Atlas Obscura.
And I took a vacation on. We went to a cabin where there were Bigfoot sightings, and we just thought, we're going to go see if we can find Bigfoot. And it turned out there was very little actual big hunt expedition part of the vacation. We kind of just stayed inside and went out and roasted marshmallows and that kind of stuff. But that was the general theme of the vacation was we're going to go find Bigfoot. And we went to the Georgia Bigfoot Conference, which thoroughly sucked, but was so much fun just because of how much it sucked. And it created great anecdotes. So going out and doing that kind of stuff is my jam.
Man, I was just talking about the other day. I want to have, we've had paranormal investigators on our show, which was some of our favorite shows, but I definitely want to talk to a Bigfoot investigator. I think that would be a fun time. So,
Jeff, you are very good at putting some unusual and unpredictable thoughts into your story, and that could make a great, I'd say, comedy stand-up guy. Have you ever thought of challenging yourself by getting some of those acts, put them together, and try to do a stand-up?
My stand-up comedy experience comes from, I emceed the Bram Stoker Awards 10 times. And that's a full-on stand-up comedy bit. So I start off, I do a full monologue, and then I do a funny introduction to every single category. That's really as far as it's gone. Part of it is, I have a good friend who's a stand-up comedian. He says, the hecklers just kill it. A lot of what you're doing is crowd control, which just, as a severe introvert. That terrifies me. I'm good at public speaking, but like this coming weekend, I'm giving a 2.5 hour talk on surviving the writing life, going to the Atlanta Writers Conference, but that's going to be a polite audience. If they have a question, they'll raise their hand. I'll answer the question. I'm not going to have hecklers. I'm not going to have drunk people talking over me. It's an audience that's there to listen, and it's going to be a friendly crowd. Whereas stand-up comedy, it's oftentimes a hostile crowd, a crowd who they don't care about you. They're at their bachelorette party, and they're back there laughing at unrelated stuff, and you're like, hey, I'm telling jokes here. So those extra elements of it, if it was a polite crowd, I could deliver the stand-up comedy. And so I've also emceed the Independent Audiobook Awards, and then I was the MC of a awards called the Eppies for quite a while. So I've emceed a lot of awards banquets. But there again, people are there to pay attention. They're there to have a good time. They're not unruly. But at stand-up comedy is a very difficult job beyond just telling the jokes. It is the oftentimes just blatantly rude audience, and that's not really something for me. So it's not something I've ever really tried. I tend to just focus more on the writing part.
Yeah. Oh man, I've been to some comedy shows where you just cringe at some people in the audience, trying to take over, yelling out stuff to the comedian. It's like, dude, shut up! Like this isn't about you. Yeah.
My friend put on a good show, and then afterwards he's like, God, those hecklers just kill me. It's like drains the fun from the process.
Messes up the timing of the cadence of the joke, or even what you're leading into on your act. I can't even imagine.
People feel like they need to be a part of the show for some reason, right? Yeah.
Every once in a great while, you see organic, crowd interaction. I've been to some shows where it was funny. I actually saw Chappelle up here in New Hampshire when he was making his little comeback before he blew up again, and now he's canceled again. I don't know, but he was interacting with the crowd, so that was funny. When it's part of what they're doing,
some
it's different.
comedians do crowd work, and that's their thing. They want, they specifically ask, because you actually, if you're like me, you sit in the audience, please don't call me, teacher. But if that's for the extrovert, that's part of the act. But if I were a stand-up comedian, I would not be doing crowd work. I would be up there doing my carefully rehearsed, every word planned for maximum effect. And then the drunk person, no suck, would just throw me off. And it's not something
I guess you could write for other comedians. So that's a thing, right? So some comedians have other writers helping them write their.
It could be. I have my own. I don't know that the stuff I write. Actually, I felt really bad when I was emceeing the Stokers. Someone did a Doctor Who joke. Someone who won had a sonic screwdriver, and I was like, just in the spur of the moment, the person next to me, I was like, "Hey, you're going to go up and say that you've in the spirit of Doctor Who, you've been regenerated. You're the regenerated host." And so I gave her the joke that I had written for the next piece. And so she went up, did that bit, and then read the funny introduction, and it didn't work. She read it exactly correctly. It was written for me and didn't work. And I felt bad because the joke bombed, and then she was like, "Oh, I set her up for failure. I feel terrible." And I don't know how good I would be at writing in other people's voices. I think I would write jokes that would work for me and then wouldn't work for them.
I went to LA years ago, and this was before Jay Leno retired from the late night, and I got to see him do stand-up at the Comedy Club, I think it was in LA or Santa Monica or somewhere. And part of his whole act was he would come out with a thick stack of note cards, and he would practice his jokes for the show that his writers gave him. And it was awkward. I actually was like, oh man, because he'd sit there and he'd read it off, get a couple chuckles. He's like, "Ah, that sucks." He'd throw it over his shoulder, but he would just go through the whole act for that night's show. And I'm like, man, it just makes you, like you just said, writing in their voice, you have to write it like they would talk, right? So that's got to be tough. But it's funny you mentioned that, Rogerio. I actually was going to ask the same question about stand-up comedy, so that's we did not talk about that before the show. So I'm
Yeah.
glad you asked that. So I wanted to ask about something you tweeted out. Actually, first, you were talking about your road trip, the flat tire. I mentioned I was going to bring that up on the show. First of all, Alan Baxter's comment made me legit laugh out loud. He's like, "What did you run over fucking Freddy Krueger?" Because the tire was just demolished.
There was no show. It was the good thing was that it was at the very end of the vacation because we put a lot of miles on the car during that trip because we drove. It's West Virginia, so nothing was close together. So it was a 500-mile drive there, and then we put 627 miles on while we were there. We just drove all over the place from haunted house to haunted house to, just all the stuff we wanted to do. And the flat tire happened when the vacation was completely over. We had said farewell to everybody. We were done. We were on our way back to Atlanta. So the timing was really good in terms of not ruining our trip. But yeah, we were literally, I think, 5 minutes into the return trip home. The tire went completely flat, but there was no shoulder. We had no place to pull over. So it was a couple of just terrifying minutes of, I need a safe place to pull over because I can't just stop in the middle of the road. So I took the first exit, then stopped at the first place, and then went out and the tire was just absolutely, completely shredded.
Oh boy. Yeah. At that point, it's like you had to drive on it so long. It's just, there's no saving that. Yeah.
Please. I didn't care about the tires. Like, please don't make the, rim have bent. Don't come out.
Right.
Got $1,300 worth of repairs. Cause it was either keep driving on the flat tire or pay for the car to be totaled when someone slams into it from behind, and involuntary manslaughter charge from parking your car, in an unsafe place. So it was not a fun way to end the trip, but the trip was over. It didn't impact the vacation at all because some of those haunted houses were in sketchy areas, and there were long trips in the middle of the night through, the rain, in long, winding, dark roads, and that would have really, really sucked. That would have
been one of your books there.
I was gonna say that's the start of most horror novels, wasn't it? The flat tire
Here we are
on the back road.
So it happened early afternoon, broad daylight, in a populated area. So it sucked, but it could have sucked infinitely worse.
Oh man, yeah. So the other question I was going to ask is about you tweeted out today that you have a story coming up in the Baker's Dozen anthology. What caught my eye was you said it maybe I believe you said one of your most grotesque stories or something along.
One of my most deranged stories.
Deranged, that's what you said. And obviously, reading a handful of your books, I'm like, oh man. So do you, any short synopsis on what it's about?
I don't want to give away the surprises, but it's called Next Best Baker, and it's inspired by the cooking shows. So MasterChef, the Great British Baking Show. It's the equivalent. It's a story basically if the people on the Great British Baking Show, the challenges just got more and more disturbing.
That's all you have to say. Yeah, I am guilty of telling everyone the whole plot when someone asks me about a story. So good for you.
Fairly long story. So it starts like here, and you think, "Oh, that's messed up," and then it just keeps going.
Great.
And that it's up for pre-order, and it should be out, I think, December 10th.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
There's dozen. I also wrote the foreword to it. So.
Yes, I did see that. Yeah. Great. Wait, did she get a sneak peek of this? Is this a
got to be a test editor on it. So
nice. Yeah. Well, that's a seller right
already
there.
Got some reviews. Yeah, already got some reviews coming in. Awesome. Yep. One of the things I like to ask Jeff for some of our horror authors is what scares you the most personally in life? Is there something that gets you going or spooks you out or creeps you out?
I'm not a, having written about spiders, I'm not a big fan of spiders. So, I have a friend who keeps tarantulas. Like, no. That's never going to happen.
Yeah.
Because I thought, wouldn't it be fun to promote Clowns versus Spiders with a live tarantula crawling? Actually, I don't want to do that. That doesn't.
Yeah, no.
That doesn't sound like it would be worth the social media interaction. So there's that. There's the generic. I could bring us all down and say, I'm not a young man anymore. So thoughts of death creep into my mind. But I'm going to go the fun answer because this is a lighthearted conversation. Just say spiders are not my thing.
Yeah, I'm out here in the wilderness, and we get some. They're like size of the palm of your hand, like with their legs and stuff. So they get pretty big. They like to come in the house this time of year. So I'm on spider duty, being the dad and the husband. So they got to be on spider removal duty.
I'm a twin, and my twin brother has. I wish he was watching this, but he's probably playing video games. Knowing him, he has crazy arachnophobia. I used to scare him so much with like daddy long legs. I'd chase him around the yard. But so he's completely terrified of spiders. I personally am not, but if it was like one of those big like barn spiders, I mean, I'm right there with you. I'm not going to go up there and like grab the thing by the leg. I'm not doing that. I'm taking something like 18,000 paper towels to squish the thing. I don't even want it to go through like single ply and like touch my finger, but so I'm not scared enough to the point where I wouldn't squish it, but I'm definitely to the point where I'm like, I need a lot of paper towels in my hand.
I'm not going to run out there. I'm like,
yeah.
I'm not, if a tarantula is crawling on my arm, it would not be a fun experience for me.
I think I would just like flick it off. I don't know if I'd scream or anything, but yeah. but yeah.
Yeah, Jeff. Going on a tangent here, like we never know when a book is going to be a hit, and you have envisioned just for as an example. Let's imagine that you have written a book. It's the whole story is there, the way you have created, right? And it's a big hit. And then your editor comes to you and says, "This is so great. We want a sequel." What would you do?
It really depends, because generally, anytime you write a book that people like, when's the next one coming out? So I get a lot, when are you going to write another follow-up to Allison? When are you going to write a follow-up to The Odds? And generally my answer is no, I just wanted to write the one. If a book went completely berserk sales-wise and it made sense, because again, going back to what we said earlier, I have to look at the financial aspects. And so I've done series. I've done Wolf Hunt. I think probably halfway through writing Wolf Hunt, I thought, I really enjoy these characters. There's no reason I can't just bring them on another adventure. So George and Lou returned for Wolf Hunt 2 and 3. My Andrew Mayhem series was consciously designed to be a series. And I ended up doing 5 books in that series. And Deathless, my most recent book, is a sequel to a book I published first in 2006. And I just thought, time is, because Pressure took place over about 20 years. I thought, well, it's been about 15 years. Now is a good time. I can sort of have another large timeline and continue with those characters. So there's pretty much any book I publish that people like, it's like, hey, when are you going to do another one? And usually the answer is no. It would take, because I generally have seen diminishing returns. So it's not like Wolf Hunt 2 did even better than Wolf Hunt 1, and Wolf Hunt 3 did even better. It's a downward slope where Wolf Hunt 2 didn't do as well as Wolf Hunt 1, and Wolf Hunt 3 didn't do as Wolf Hunt 2, even though people like them more. The review averages are better for Wolf Hunt 3 than they are for Wolf Hunt 2 than they are for Wolf Hunt 1, but sales-wise, it's kind of diminishing, partly because it takes me forever to do the sequels. So, when the 5th Andrew Mayhem book comes out 9 years after the 4th one, a lot of people have fallen away from it. So I don't do sequels right. You're supposed to do them much faster while they're fresh in people's memory. But it would really take, to do a sequel, the previous book needs to do really, really well. It needs to do well enough that I say, okay, from a financial standpoint, I can justify this being the next book as opposed to something more original, because I need the books to sell at a certain level so I don't return in shame to my day job. So not that there would be any shame, and I would proudly say, yes, I failed. But for sequels, it would need to be something really, really successful. I have lots of movie stuff going on behind the scenes, and it's all, this, you can't talk about any of it, and it's slow development. If one of those were to hit, then there would probably be, hey, it's time to write a sequel
right.
on that.
Sure.
But as far as like Allison, I really enjoyed Allison. Allison's one of my favorites in my books. Readers really liked it. There's no good reason for me to do Allison Returns as opposed to an original book at this point. Not saying it won't happen, but it's not currently on my list of projects that I'm pursuing.
Yeah, because some people, they really do get resentful if you don't follow up, on the same level. They start to go berserk and talk shit about you, and that's terrible. Maybe it is not terrible because they are talking about you, and there's no such a thing as a bad advertisement.
Yeah, I've been fortunate that people generally like the sequels more. Now, I haven't done that. I did 5, but the Andrew Mayhem series, it's a horror thriller series, so it's not something where, my God, this was the best book I ever wrote. It took me 5 years. How will I ever top it? It was meant to be an ongoing series. And same thing with the Wolf Hunt books. It's like, okay, I just need to be funnier and more action packed with each successive book. Deathless, we'll see. Very few people have read it so far. The people who have read it have said it's better than Pressure. Now that's a very, very tiny representative sample. So I could hit the same thing that you just talked about with people saying, oh, that didn't live up to it at all. I'm hoping that's not the case. The tiny sampling does not think that's the case, but we'll see. I will find right now all that's come out is the collector's edition. November 30th will be the affordable editions, and so we'll see how that works out. I may be no one liked Deathless, or I maybe just did it. A question came up and I missed it because I was focused on
it's okay.
Okay.
No worries. Yeah. So Lionel wants to know, what are your thoughts on taking characters from different novels and bringing them together, like Allison meets Boyd from Sick House, and they share a story? I was actually going to ask that question too. Instead of doing a sequel, maybe they're cross genre or live in the same universe and they just happen upon each other in that story arc.
I've never really gone for that level of fan service. I've always kind of said my books don't take place in a shared universe. There's not the Jeff Strand universe where, Allison's going to pop up in a supporting role in someone else's book. So it's not really ever anything I've planned and probably never will do. I don't know. I know Stephen King has Castle Rock where everything's connected and it's really cool. Joe Conrath does that. Every Joe Conrath book relates to every other Joe Conrath book. And I've just never done that. Allison does not take place in the same universe as The Odds or Wolf Hunt. I don't know. It always just feels like it would be kind of fan service. I guess if I were way more popular, it's like everyone has read Allison and everyone has read Wolf Hunt, so let's bring them together, I might do it. But for the most part, I've never really considered. I'll do direct sequels, but I've never thought of what if, Sick House and Allison were combined. And I may, suddenly, having just gone on record as saying that, probably tonight I'll come up with an amazing way to do it. But at this point, speaking now at 10:33 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, it's not an idea that has come to me.
Well, and you talked about, how a lot of your stuff crosses different genres and areas, right? So some of that might be hard to mix too, I'm sure.
Like you can do Andrew Mayhem meets George and Lou because George and Lou are fighting werewolves, and there's nothing supernatural in the Andrew Mayhem series.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I was going to say, when you talked about how when you see diminishing sales from a sequel, it's really no different in the comic world. We actually had Doug Wagner from Image Comics on, and he was talking about that with us, how he wanted to do a follow-up series to his most popular series. And I think it was Image Comics directly that was like, well, what you see issue 1, and then it's like a downward trend until the series finale. Basically, it's like this dip, right? And then if you have a follow up, the sales tend to trail off a bit. So it sounds pretty similar than on the pro side. So I just wanted to make that statement there, because comic wise, it's really no different either. So
that's why they reset stuff at #1.
Exactly. Yeah, this is the first run of a character that's been in 20,000 runs, but it's a new arc. So
it's like 67 Spider-Man titles out right now. I can't even keep track of it. There's Amazing Spider-Man, The Spider-Man. It's like how many? They can't follow the storylines. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they keep resetting Spider-Man. So hard to.
Yeah, talking about that, we can do the whole sequence of 5 books for that ball, like a 1A, 1B, 1C. Just
call them all #1.
Yeah, all of them will be #1. You're all special. Everybody's going to get a medal.
Oh, man. Well, we are at the 90-minute mark here. I mentioned we check in around now. I don't know if we've talked about quite a bit of pieces of work of yours, Jeff, but is there anything else that you want to make sure you bring up or talk to here while we're on?
No, I think we've covered a lot of ground. We've made memories. We've shared lots of great moments. I think this has been great.
Good.
Going on record with some key important stuff, like make sure we get that on film here. So
I think we've avoided long, awkward silences. I feel like if we drag it out too much, like at some point I'll say something that sets one of you off, and then
that's views. That gets views. Get us viral.
That only happens because I'm not drinking tonight. I'm on sober November. I couldn't do last month, so I'm doing this month. And I am not as creative as I used to be, so I couldn't come up with some. Those moments, there's a nice question. It's not going to happen this month. So,
and I see you guys will be doing the Wolf Hunt comics soon, so I'll be looking forward to seeing that.
Hey, we'll definitely, for real, we'll have to chat offline. We definitely,
that could work just well. Yeah.
All right, we're good.
Rogerio would be the model for the werewolf.
I got one.
He's the Wolfman.
Yeah,
he's the Wolfman.
I'm the Wolfman here.
Yeah, well, you're blocking it.
Oh, see, the work is done.
Yeah. There you go. Yeah, we're writing a series called Dead Ball, where it takes place in the early 1900s, and there's this evil carnival basically after this baseball player from the early 1900s, and one of the carnies is a Wolfman. So it's Rogerio sent us the first page of it, and I'm like, wait, is that you?
I guess we need to pick a different book. I don't want you guys to get typecast as the Wolfman.
Oh no, we're all over the place. We cross so many different genres. But
Rogerio does want a hot female lead in some book that he wants to do. He wants to draw some vivacious women pretty soon. So we got to set him up with that character. So.
See, you ain't got the chance.
Yeah, gotta hook him up.
Let's see, Rogerio. I wanted to ask you, Jeff. You mentioned Scares That Cares earlier. Are you gonna be there at all this coming year? Do you know? Or
both? I'm going to be at the regular Scares That Care
nice.
in Virginia, but I'm also going to be at Scares That Care AuthorCon, which is Scares That Care overall is multimedia. It's got authors, it's got actors, and everyone. And then they're doing this year, April 1st through 3rd, also in Williamsburg, Virginia. They're doing Scares That Care AuthorCon, which is just the authors, and I will be at that the whole time. So.
Awesome. I've said on a few shows now.
We'll walk you right up to Brian Keenan and say, hey, here's my good friend John Durgan, and you can fanboy out as much as you want.
I plan to try to get there. I've said on a few shows that's the goal. So if my wife is watching, she's gonna get the hint. We live in New Hampshire. It's an 11-hour drive. I think I'd rather drive than fly down, but I don't know.
We drive because my wife, Lynn Hansen, she sells her art there. And so we can't really pack it on the plane. So we have to just fill the car and drive. So,
yeah, that's the goal. My plan is to be there.
So do it.
I want to. We've had a lot of guests on that are going to be there, I think. So it'll be cool to meet all you guys in person. That's
talking about you while you're not there. You want to be
exactly. Yeah, you got it. Yeah. Well, I'm glad you came on. We really appreciate it.
I want to.
Yeah.
Man.
We stay offline for a few minutes after, but I know Joel, he runs the buttons on his end here. So
I do run the buttons. buttons are coming.
do.
So do we a good night to the viewing audience? I know
Yes.
at least Lionel, Ray Green, and Bridget Nelson were watching. So thank you very much for your
Yeah.
We got a lot of lurkers. They don't participate. They just lurk and creep around.
That's why I always
That's
tweet
okay.
out like,
That's
"Hey,
okay.
comment." The shows where we have a lot of questions and comments, you know, they're a lot of fun, but you know, it is what it is.
Intimidating tonight.
I guess so.
Yeah. Threatening crowd here tonight, so
Right.
I understand. It's okay. Yeah.
Like we don't want to
Jeff. Yeah,
off.
appreciate your time tonight. Yeah. Yep. Awesome.
Thank
So
you.
yeah, thanks
Thank you.
Jeff
So-
for coming out, and thanks Rosario for being sober tonight. No, it's kidding. No matter. So we'll be back on Friday night. We have comic book creator Anthony LaFauci is coming on. He's a publisher at Ostrich Colony Comics. We'll be back Friday night at 9 talking some indie comic stuff. So hope you guys can check that out. With that, hope everybody has a continued great evening, and hope you stay livid, and we'll catch you on the next one.